Ready?
That's what I understand.
Call the meeting to order, please. This is the Village of Trustee Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, June 5th, 2014. The time is 7 o'clock. I ask the clerk to please call the roll. Here.
Trustee Sussman. Here. Trustee Hamilton. Here. Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Trustee Valerie.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Foley.
Here.
Village Manager Scalera.
Here.
Village Attorney Marr.
Here.
Village Attorney Molina.
Here.
Also present, Village Clerk Haley.
We're all here. I'd ask you to please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to everyone here tonight and everybody watching at home. You're welcome to speak at any time during our meeting. You can speak during the public comment section here at the beginning of the meeting, or if you would rather wait till a specific agenda item comes up, you're welcome to wait and speak at that time. I just ask that you be recognized by the president and you make your remarks from the podium so that the folks at home can see and hear what you have to say. So first up is presentations and public comment. Would anybody like to address the board? Mr. Gallegos.
Alex Gallegos, 3234 South Harlem. Good evening, Mr. President, trustees, those in attendance, and to those watching at home. Sir, I come before you and the Village Board on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. I have a few reminders tonight. A reminder that our cruise night will be on Thursday, June 12th. Rick Ravella, who has put all that together and has done that for the last several years, will come up and talk about that more in detail. But the other reminder is the steak fry. The annual steak fry will be held on Friday, June 20th. Here on East Avenue. It'll be from 7 o'clock until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Tickets are available at RK Jewelers, Riverside Bank, and Sylvester Realty, and they are $30 a piece. In the mail, you should get either today or tomorrow, Chamber is sending out postcards, which will have coupons for choo-choos, mollies, and this will be a series of coupons, so look for those in the mail and take advantage of them. And lastly, Gene, we want to congratulate you and Raw on putting on a fantastic, and I think this is the second biggest one you ever had in history. It's the biggest? Okay, well, congratulations. It was a wonderful event.
Thank you.
You worked with Mother Nature. She was on your side, and things went really well. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. And to everybody who worked on it, thank you.
And I have nothing further. Thank you,
sir. Appreciate it. Rick, did you want to say something about the...
Rick Ravella, Riverside Garage. I just thought I should come myself and talk about the cruise nights because being there, I know what's going on. We've been doing cruise nights from about 05. Our first big car show was actually in 95, which I know probably a lot of people here were there. We did it with an antique fair. So after that, we ran car shows on Sundays once a year all that time. And then when I saw the other suburbs around us starting to do cruise nights, that's what kind of geared me into saying, we could do that here. 05, we started our first ones. We're doing 3 cruise nights a year with a big car show at the end. So it kind of builds towards that car show. We're once a month. It's on Thursday. It's the second Thursday of the month. Our first one last year had 120 cars show up. We're going to have choo-choo out there cooking. Everybody can come by and have ice cream, and Auntie Anna's is open. Empanadas will be out there. Come out, see the cars. We're going to go from 6 to 9. Come out there and see the cars and see what it's all about. It's always a good time for everybody. So, any questions by anybody?
It's not a question, but it's a statement that I don't think people really understand is how much Riverside Garage and you and Larry are involved in it, and you have all your employees working it, and a lot of it comes out of your pocket, and for the better of the village, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, we try to keep the cruise nights kind of the garage thing, with the chamber helping. I've got Riverside Bank as sponsorship. It's kind of a garage thing, it's kind of a guy thing. So, yeah, we're stepping up to do it. And, I talked to a lady today in another suburb where they lost their cruise nights. And I think we can't lose stuff like this. We have to keep it going. I try to keep it away from, my guys try to do as much public works as possible that we're allowed. We try to do, cleaning the streets when we're done. I try to keep everything, on my side versus your side. So it's not coming out of taxpayers', coffers. I think that's the best way to do it. We've been doing a really good job, I thought, for the last few years. And anybody that has a problem can always call me, and I'm always open for something. So, anything else?
Anything else? No? Thanks.
Oh,
Chris.
one other thing. Cruise nights are free. We do 11 trophies at the end of the night. So anybody can bring their cars in. The trophies, are just kind of a nice little, hey, you brought a beautiful car, let's give you something. And I'll tell you, after the guys come to our cruise nights, they really like it. It makes everyone look good. The village looks great after we do a nice, good job with this, so, And I appreciate, allowing me to get this done, so. It takes a little work on your side by just, being okay with this, so.
Rick, do you have any idea how many cars you're anticipating for this first one? You getting a lot of calls, or-
Last year, the first one, we did 120, and I'll tell you, there's enough room there where I can get another, 40 in there without a problem. I know that there's a Model T club coming, which is always fun. They always usually have a Model T sitting there running. You could barely hear the thing going, which is kind of cool. I never know, but it's always fun. About 5 o'clock, I hear the engine start coming down the street, and it's kind of neat, So, and I just hope I'm going to get all my ads out there so everybody can come up and see everything. It's hard to get the word out sometimes. That's why I'm here. I want everyone to know that that's what's going on. So,
The date again was June 12th?
yeah, June 12th will be our first one. There's posters in a lot of the business windows. I've been stuffing flyers in cars in the local cruise nights. So after tonight, I'm out to Westmont to put flyers out over there. So we're getting kind of known around the area. So.
Great. Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Rick. They really are fun. I encourage everybody to go out and see them. And our very own village manager got a trophy last year from the cruise night.
You did.
Can you bring his scooter? Can he bring his scooter? Yeah. Sure. Mr. Spatney, you wanted to have a word?
At 111 Woodside. Rick is really a great guy, and he really does a good job with this thing. And I go out and hand out flyers too. It's very popular amongst people, I can tell you. Two things I wanted to mention. The first was about the streets. When the painting gets done this year, again, hopefully it'll be a different paint than in the past, where that stuff wears off in about a week. I would like to suggest a center line on Burling down here past the library, because you get these people coming and they think it's only one lane of traffic, and when the trains are blocked up, all the people that want to go that way in town, down Riverside Road or something, are stuck because they're right in the middle and they just think it's one lane. So if there was a line there, I think there used to be one, but it's all worn off. There are 2 lanes of traffic plus the parked cars on Burling. So we might think about that. And also on these the little crosses on the park spaces out here, to define the parking spaces. Many times, there's 4 spaces in front of the town hall, but many times people are parked in the middle because they're completely worn off now. The other thing I wanted to ask about was, has anything happened with the Swan Pond? Anything cooking? Anybody come and look at it? Anybody? Yeah.
Oh. First thing I'd like to comment on is the pavement markings in this year's capital improvement budget is $20,000 for thermoplastic pavement markings. Later on this month, probably early in July, I'll be advertising for bids for pavement markings that will address a lot of those issues that Mr. Spatney raised. Clearly, a lot more durable. We know that the paint doesn't last, and a lot of say private sector companies, for instance, in their parking lots, like a Walmart or something like that, will have their parking stalls painted twice per year because the paint isn't that durable. So that's in the works. Secondly, with regards to Swan Pond, my manpower is about to shift over there. My excess manpower is about to shift over there. Last week, middle of last week, my high school or college seasonal workers came on. I was able to shift some excess employees to the back of Village Hall, working on this landscape project back here. That should be completed in a couple of days. The next project is Swan Pond. I'm in the process of engaging a contractor to repair the south end wall where the water comes in. As a matter of fact, I'm corresponding, late this afternoon I was corresponding with him about some insurance requirements. We're still waiting for word from Corps of Engineers on the erosion area down by the culvert on the north end. And we'll be staking the trees, some of the trees that were bent over. We'll be staking those next week also. So after maybe a long wait in some people's minds, we're finally, the Public Works Department will finally be focusing its attention on Swan Pond. It won't be fixed overnight. There's a lot of work down there yet, but we're going to really start plugging away on it. We did mow grass down there. That was relatively successful. We didn't get it all mowed, but we're able to do that even with debris in the grass, because we can, we lift up the deck on the mower, and things are moving along there. I think they're just starting to move along.
And I'd note that the contractor who will be doing the repairs to the wall is the same contractor that made the repairs to the stairs at one time.
Right.
Are they going to address culvert pipe bed?
I don't know.
What is the scope of the permit?
The permit is stream bank stabilization, which is repair of the erosion area. The village manager, I think, has a meeting next week with the Corps of Engineers to discuss Swan Pond in general.
Have you walked it with them?
That's what I'm going to be doing next week.
Okay.
I can mention also that in addition to this wall on the south end that I think will be repaired by this contractor, that also includes the steps that's in this, the steps that are going down to the river in that kind of plaza area. Some of those pieces of concrete were displaced also.
Details?
You know the Hawks lost, so you can.
Still having fun with it. Okay. It is a nuisance sometimes.
Anyone else like to address the board before we move on? Okay, moving on. Next up is report of village officers. The president's report. Just have a couple things. First, just to follow up on Mr. Bailey was just saying, I've heard a lot of nice comments from folks saying how nice the village looks, and you guys are really doing a really good job. Sometimes I think people forget that almost 50% of our public land is park space and green space, so it's quite a burden on our public works people to keep up with all that. A reminder about the farmers markets. They're back in swing again Wednesdays at 2:30. And with regard to the First Avenue consideration of the overpass or underpass idea, we had originally sent that to the Safe Environment Commission. They contacted us and told us that they did not feel that they had the sufficient expertise to really give a learned opinion about that. So we have asked our village attorney, Christopher Burke, the village engineer, although you guys can look at it too, the village engineer to take a look at it, and they're going to give us an opinion as to whether or not either an overpass or underpass would be a viable alternative for that intersection. So that's where that stands. And that is all I have. Mr. Manager.
I have a few items. Ed did touch already on the Township Hall landscape. His department is hard at work back there, and they've rototilled the area, and they've started the seeding, and we should have that completed, like Ed said, early part of next week, and then followed by placement of signs on either end, just letting people know that the area is not officially open for people to use as a walking path or running path. But the space will be green, it's being planted with native plantings, and hopefully will replace the dirt that's been out there for the last few weeks. I wanted to just update the board in regards to a request that was made by Trustee Ballerine at the last meeting concerning the cul-de-sacs. Staff is working on reviewing pros and cons of that recommendation or suggestion. We unfortunately will not be prepared to bring that item back to the board for discussion at your next meeting as you had originally directed us. So I just wanted to alert you that we will need some time before we can bring that back to the board, but we will bring it back at a later date. I also wanted to update the board and the community that we have initiated our streetscape project for Burlington. Public Works Director Bailey, myself, President Sells, and Burke Engineering had a sit-down to discuss possible timeline for the project. And we are going to be working feverishly to try and put together a draft plan that will be available for discussion at future public meetings. Christopher Burke will be working with a third-party individual that will provide assistance in reviewing the plan to ensure that it meets our needs or requirements, or look for things that perhaps Burke may miss in developing their plan. The third party is a landscape architect with strong background in retail development. So once I have a set timeline, I will bring that back to the board and alert you as far as how that is progressing. And finally, I wanted to introduce our new management intern who has joined us this evening, Ed T. Luxing. He is a graduate of the MPA program from the University of South Carolina, and Ed will be assisting not only the manager's office, but also our finance department. And I've already been asked by other departments if he can assist in number of projects and research that they have on a waiting list. So Ed will be primarily focused in the beginning here on helping us with our waste contract, which is coming up due at the end of this year, and the redesign of our website. So I just wanted to introduce Ed to the community. And that is all I have.
Welcome.
Couple issues just on the cul-de-sac.
Sure.
You know, I read the landmark. I'm not prepared, and I don't think people quite understood. I'm not advocating putting a bubble over Riverside or having toll gates or whatever. But you know, I'd like to look at, you know, especially like York, Robinson, and Berkeley, those type of streets. And I mean, it's not only cul-de-sacs, it's possibly maybe even a one-way going out, but just open, just.
Right, and I apologize. That's the review that staff is conducting, is we will be looking at cul-de-sacs. Something that Oak Park also utilizes is a one-way out with kind of like a little bump out that would help control traffic, as well as possibly changing the direction of certain streets.
Which is nothing more than any other suburb uses in their community, and
right.
People seem to get around.
Anything else? Okay, moving on. Next up is the approval of the consent agenda. Do any items need to be removed for discussion by anyone?
F, please.
Okay. With the exception of F, I would ask for a motion and second to approve A through E.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sussman. Second by Mr. Ballerine. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Ballerine.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Fuller.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item F is an ordinance ascertaining the prevailing rate of wages for laborers, mechanics, and other workers employed in public works projects for the village of Riverside. Mr. Ballerine?
My question is, Lance, I remember last year you gave us a brief explanation of especially landscape, like when we want to redo a park or we want to redo a ball field or something like that. Can you just explain what goes under prevailing wage and what doesn't?
I can't do that, but I can explain that there have been efforts through negotiations with labor management, management of landscape companies and municipalities to try to add some clarity and to add some flexibility in non-prevailing wage contracts that use landscaping. What the statute says is work that's done on a public work. Department of Labor, though, has defined that, and it has no rulemaking authority, but it sets policy through its website examples and through its enforcement activities. And Department of Labor has been broadening what is a public work for a long time. And one of the things that these negotiations were able to do is to take certain contracts, first of all, anything that involves bricks and mortar is a public work, including all the landscaping that's ancillary to it. Okay, that's for sure. It's been that way for a long time, and it is that way now under the interpretation of the statute by DOL. That's clear. And also, maintenance of landscaping is clear that is not governed by prevailing wage. That's also clear. What was unclear and where we've tried to add some clarity is in between. And one of the major things that came out of the negotiations is that the removal of diseased trees and their replacement doesn't have to be dictated by prevailing wage. So, and that was viewed a very strong thing argued for by the municipalities because of emerald ash borer, and still the elms were still losing. And so that's one area that's been clarified. The flip side of that, though, is also true, which is installation of new parkway trees is a public work. Installation of just pure garden sections in a municipality are not prevailing wage now, unless it involves putting in perennials or trees, and then it would be. So those are some of the areas. It's not a bright line test. I can't tell you what's covered and what's not on a contract by contract basis, but it's something that Peter will look at and follow the website that's been changed, and you can look at how to contract things to try to maximize the cost savings in those areas. And I would also state that it is required that the prevailing wage ordinance be adopted, Trustee Valorant. So I would just note for the record.
So I'd ask for a motion in a second to approve the ordinance ascertaining prevailing rates of wage.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Collins, second by Mr. Foley. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Valerian.
No. It's in 3 years, I have to do it every year.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Motion carries. Next up are reports of departments and commissions, and first under that item is a motion to approve the field maintenance agreement between Riverside Little League and the Village of Riverside Parks and Recreation Department. Mr. Ballerine, would you like to present this?
Well, it's over the many years, the Village of Riverside and Little League have gone around and around with the maintenance, the field maintenance issue, whether a field is playable, whether a field is not playable. Our department, or the recreation department, is somewhat limited in their resources. They have one part-time and one seasonal. They have nobody on the weekends. So over the last 6-7 months, the recreation department, the recreation board, and the Little League have been discussing kind of a trial run for the year where the recreation does a weekly maintenance. So we will go out there, drag the fields, line the fields, and do a safety inspection, make sure the fields are in good shape, that nobody can get injured and stuff like that. And then the Little League, through their volunteers, will do the day-to-day maintenance, the raking, the DuraPlay. They will purchase that merchandise, and they will hire sports fields if they wanted to have that kind of stuff done. So it's a one-year trial. It'll free up our department to do more maintenance on, like you say, the 1,100 acres of parks that we have and all the other parks. And I think it will also allow Little League to, in one way, see how much work it is to maintain the fields, and the other way, possibly do a better job than the rec department did, because they actually have more volunteers than we do. So, it could be a very good win-win. I think Ron has done a wonderful job listening to the needs of the community and the needs of this organization. They're large. They have 500 some odd kids playing. Trying to work with them, trying to work with the village to get a solution that's both, economically feasible for the department and, work for Little League. So I think it's a win-win. So I'm looking forward to this experiment.
So I'd ask for a motion to approve the field maintenance agreement.
So moved.
Mr. Ballerine?
Second.
Second by Mr. Foley. Further discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up are ordinances and resolutions. First, an ordinance amending the village code of the Village of Riverside relative to driveway apron paving requirements. Mr. Scalera.
Sure. The item before you, the Village Municipal Code allows homeowners in residential districts the option of replacing or constructing new driveways with concrete, natural stone, brick, or concrete block pavers. However, the code currently requires the use of exposed aggregate concrete finish for driveway aprons. During the board's May 1, 2014 meeting, the board discussed the type of finish of public walks following a presentation by Public Works Director Bailey related to a village-wide sidewalk inspection program. The board discussed the difference between finishes and costs associated with each finish. Trustees agreed to continue their discussion with regard to public sidewalks. However, they directed the village attorney to prepare an ordinance, which you have in your packet, for consideration that would amend the municipal code to allow broom finish concrete for driveway apron in residential and business districts, provided that no bright or stark white finish be allowed.
So I'd ask for a motion to approve the ordinance.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Foley.
Second.
By Ms. Hamilton. Questions? Discussion?
Yeah, I have some questions. I have a couple of questions, Ed. Who determines then if it's too stark white or too bright? That's my first question. How is that determined? And then the second question is, will the application well, go ahead. I'll come back with a second one.
One of the best ways maybe to address that issue of the final finish of the concrete is to refer to, well, let me back up by saying that the specifications for many of the projects, public works projects that are undertaken, are created by IDOT, and they're published in this book, widely used throughout the state. It's called the Standard Specifications for Road and Bridge Construction. There's a concrete section within this book, and within the concrete section is a section titled what IDOT titles securing membranes. That material that's applied over concrete to for curing purposes. And they list type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 is unpigmented, clear. And for instance, type 3 is white pigmented. Clearly, I think that's what the village is wanting to avoid, is the white pigmentation. And then a fourth one is boiled linseed oil. Potentially the village could cite this manual and really require either type 1 or boiled linseed oil. There's another one, I'm not too sure of it, but definitely one that you want to avoid, I believe, is the type 3, which is the curing membrane with white pigmentation.
I think what one way to try and encourage consistency, I think, is what we will have to do is we will develop some kind of flyer that when someone comes in for a permit, we can give that to them. That kind of tells them these are the specifications that we approve for this apron work.
Number E. It's
Right, no,
sort of spelled out there.
I know it, but that was my question. Is that going to, are those the only, in other words, will somebody who wants to redo the apron be handed a sheet that has in effect E in it?
Yes.
From the, okay. So they actually have to, it says such as, I guess I just want to avoid having somebody come and say, well, it wasn't clear, I didn't.
We can make it very, I guess my point is we can make it very clear.
Right. What we'll do is Ed and I we will develop, based on this, that guideline that we can then give to the applicant.
Okay, and then that person has to, when they have the building permit, they have to specify then how they're, what kind of application process they're gonna have, right?
Correct.
How it's mixed, okay.
Following up on that same, before you go on to the next one, this says should be utilized. So the way it's worded, they don't have to do that. Do you want to require them to do that? Should it say shall be utilized?
Or must be utilized?
Or must be utilized?
I'm not the author of the document.
I guess I have a more specific question. Would it be more appropriate to actually cite the manual that Mr. Bailey's taught and
You have that other places in your ordinance, so that's fine. And in terms of the question that Trustee Pollock just raised, I mean, it says in the sentence before that you can't have bright or stark white finish. So I think what I was trying to get at was just that here's some possible alternative ways to make it a dull finish. But we can make that word shall also.
Because that goes back to my question, which is if somebody's coming in and filling out an application for a driveway or for the apron, in that application, are they going to be required to state what kind of process? And if so, then it has to say must be one of these kinds of things, or must be something that won't produce a stark white or a bright.
Well, I think when they come in and complete or submit the application, we're not going to tell them or ask them, how are you going to pour this concrete? What I'm envisioning is we will give them this provision that this is how it should be poured, and the responsibility then becomes on them to pour it that way.
Just like any other part of the building code,
Right.
and then there's an inspection after it's poured.
Yeah, to close out the permit.
Right.
But it does seem to me that this current language is kind of nebulous. If we have a manual, a standardized manual that we can cite to, would that be better?
Yeah.
do you think?
I think that's a good idea.
I can work with Ed and Peter to amend the language.
It's fine as long as there aren't a whole lot of ways to get at the same thing that are, but if we can specify a specific approach.
So would it be best to table this and bring it back next time after you've had a chance to do that?
Yeah, if we're going to name something specific, we'll probably work with it.
I can say I have used or have required in probably a curb and gutter project that boiled linseed be used as a curing agent, and it was a dull gray finish. There's no question about that.
Mr. Cole?
I don't think the stark whiteness thing is something that I think the world should be frightened and concerned about. Concrete is a naturally porous material. You can pour a sidewalk square, and in about 4 months from now, that sidewalk square will dull half of its natural color. Concrete in its natural state, when it's poured from a concrete truck, is gray, dark gray. And as it cures, and it does take a while for concrete to fully cure, it will get darker and darker and darker. When you're seeing a concrete sidewalk that's been poured a few days after it's been poured, it's naturally white because it's actually leaching itself out. And the more that it rains and the more water that is placed upon the concrete, the darker the concrete will get. The concrete wants to have water in it, and that's what helps settle the color down in concrete. You have to go out of your way to get a very stark white concrete. You actually would have to add a colorant to it to make it white. It doesn't want to be white, it wants to be naturally gray. And I don't think, I'm actually more concerned and want to make sure that it's clear to the residents that we don't want to see green aprons and red aprons and brown aprons and all the colors that you can color concrete. But if you were to just have the truck roll up and pour your apron, within 6 months that apron will match the color of all the sidewalk squares in town because it naturally dulls itself. You don't have to naturally add linseed oil to it. You don't have to follow IDOT's specifications because that's a completely, and Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they pour a road, they take a slump test and they're looking for the fiber mesh in the concrete. They're looking for the slag of the concrete. So I'm not worried about the common resident pouring an apron and it turning out to be as white as a sheet of this paper. It won't be this color. It's not this color the day after it's poured, and it only gets darker from there. So I just don't want people to think that it's just going to be stark whiteness, and it's not.
Mr.
I guess just to follow up in a little bit, I think the point is if you're using a curing agent, you want to prohibit pigmented curing agents.
And the curing agents, again, are more for protection against salt erosion, right? Like you put on your driveway to protect the salt falling off of your car. The curing agents can accelerate the curing of a concrete, correct?
The curing agent is for the purpose of maintaining the proper amount of
Moisture
in the concrete for the 30 days it takes for it
to cure. And Richard, your feeling on what it does to
Okay,
the color?
let's not have a discussion like this. Mr. Ray, if you want to speak, you'll need to come up to the. Okay.
I guess my preference would still be to be as specific as possible, to eliminate after the fact arguments with the building department.
Could something be simply said as no pigmented curing agents?
I think so.
Would that
Right.
would that solve the problem? I mean, that would allow not to have red, blue, green, and white.
I was just going to say, interestingly enough, the 3 other communities that we have participated in with our sidewalk bidding process, those 3 other communities required pigmented curing agents to be used. So, for whatever reason, as a matter of fact, I asked my counterpart from Western Springs, why, and he said, well, I don't know, we just do that or something like that. But again, I think it's.
They know it's been done.
Pardon me?
They know it's been done.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll come and get it.
Otherwise, what, Rich? Can you
You're
come
probably
here?
going to get a curing agent on an apron. It's unlikely.
But if you want to avoid it, I think that's the thing to do, is to prohibit pigmented curing.
So then going back to that, then what is your preference? Do you want them to redraft this to include specific references to this, or do you just want it to be as simple as do not use any pigmented curing agents?
I'd like it to be as specific as possible. My preference would be to follow what Mr. Reilly suggested.
Yeah? Yeah, that's okay, Mr. Ray.
There's one other possibility. It's right, 262 line out. There's one other thing a person can do, and that's use white cement. And there is such a product as white cement, and it'll come out white if they use white cement. So if you want to attack the problem by saying, don't do this, that should be included in the wording. The things you can't do is use white cement. Okay? White Portland cement.
I think we hold a record on talking about cement. So I'd like to have a motion, a second, to table this until the next meeting.
I have one other question. Are we okay with giving everyone the option of aggregate or brushed concrete? Because that's what this does. So we could have random, every other side apron could be different. Well, different from the one next to it. I kind of lean toward one standard.
I would think one would do what their driveway, the rest of the driveway on their property is. I would find it unusual to have a concrete driveway and an exposed aggregate apron from an aesthetic standpoint.
Right. I mean, maybe it wouldn't happen, but this way this is written, you have a choice of doing concrete, broomed concrete versus the aggregate.
And I think more importantly, the other thing, and Richard, I don't know if you'll back me on this or not, but every yard that manufactures concrete, whether it's one yard or another, one company or another, their pours are all different colors from one company to another. And in what I've heard, in some instances, they used to do that so they knew whose concrete was what. But they're all different. I mean, you can go, I don't want to name names, but a lot of the different companies that are out there that are manufacturing the concrete and delivering it to the job site, from one company to another, the concrete is a naturally different color as it comes out of the truck. So, and since we have no restriction on who the contractor uses to procure their concrete from, then we're left with whatever is delivered to the site.
So how can we answer Gene's objection and be specific? Can we just say that it has to be non-pigmented curing agent, or do we say that it has to be linseed oil only? We have to choose something. It's either, we have to be as specific as we can.
Why wouldn't, well, no.
Is that what you're, Gene, help me with this.
Yeah,
We were saying no pigments and no white Portland cement in the mix. That's what I thought we were saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that clear?
Yes, I can live with that.
Okay, so I'd have a motion to table, please.
Well, it's still my question. If everyone's okay with that, that's fine with me. I'll go along with the
I'm
majority.
okay with
of
it because of what Mike just said, is that even if we said it all has to be broom finished, it's not all going to look the same anyway, because it's going to look different. So if they want to do aggregate, I have no problem with that.
I think that's good because there are sidewalks in town that are primarily aggregate anyway.
So now a motion to table.
I'll move to table.
Motion by Mr. Follett. Second by Ms. Hamilton. Please call the roll on the motion to table.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollak.
Aye.
Trustee Geller.
Aye.
Trustee Thomas.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
This motion is tabled until our next meeting. And lest anyone get nervous, just wait, because in Section C, we get to talk about concrete again. So. Next up is a resolution authorizing and ratifying execution of a master power supply agreement for the Village of Riverside Electrical Aggregation Program with First Energy Solutions Corporation. Are you going to do
Yes,
this,
I'm
Mr.
doing that.
Scalera?
Okay. This item is based on a 2012 referendum question which established the Village of Riverside Municipal Aggregation Program. The village worked at that time with Northern Illinois Municipal Electric Collaborative to negotiate a 2-year contract with Direct Energy, which expires at the end of this July. At the board's February 6, 2012 meeting, the board agreed to once again work with NIMAC to solicit bids from multiple suppliers and select one that best meets the needs of the village. Following the February meeting, the village, along with NIMAC, participated in 2 competitive bid processes from multiple electric suppliers, hoping to find the best rate for the village. On May 13th, NIMAC received bids from 6 electric suppliers. After review of the proposed rates, NIMAC and the village determined the green rate being offered by First Energy was the most competitive, with the estimated ComEd rate while providing the energy being 100% renewable. Based on the bid results, the village has negotiated and entered into a 3-year agreement beginning July 2014 with First Energy as the village's new electric supplier under our aggregation program.
I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the resolution.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Foley,
Second.
second by Ms. Hamilton. Discussion or questions?
So is this rate less than ComEd's rate?
No. ComEd's rate, they're estimating, is going to be, I think, 7.88 once you add in the delivery charge. And this rate puts us right at that rate, but the difference being this is a renewable rate, whereas the ComEd rate is a 100% brown rate.
Which takes us to a referendum we had in 2008 that the overwhelmingly the residents of this village said for the village to do whatever they could to try to do green infrastructure, green rates. So even though this is, revenue neutral between ComEd and the aggregate program, this is 100% green. And then you have options too. You can stay with ComEd, and you can do their real-time pricing, which is again very green. But if you can work.
Everyone in the community will be receiving a opt-out letter, so you have the ability to not participate in the aggregation program and move over to the ComEd rate. And the agreement also provides a out clause for the village, where if the ComEd rate goes below our current rate that we've received, that the village has the option of moving the entire community back onto ComEd.
Peter, does ComEd, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so just tell me one more time. So this is better because it's green energy.
Right.
And what was the other thing that you said? It's renewable?
Green.
That's what you're talking
Right.
about? It's renewable. Okay, gotcha. I didn't know if it meant the rate.
Which meets the, as Trustee Ballerine mentioned, the calling of the community that the village tried to find ways to be sustainable.
When you said renewable, I first thought you
I'm
meant
sorry.
renewable rate, but you're talking about renewable energy.
Right.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Peter, does ComEd offer a green energy option at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
But they
So-
do offer real-time pricing,
Right.
which in a
Yeah,
way
I
is
know.
very green, but you have to be able to live with doing your dishes at 2 in the morning.
Right, but, okay, so let me understand. So the section that reads
The reason why
price-
ComEd doesn't is ComEd is mostly ComEd is purchases just like First Energy is. They purchase the electricity on the market, and then they transmit it over their lines to your home. The only green that they offer is what Trustee Ballerine, the real-time pricing. They don't
Right.
have a.
But my understanding from 2 years ago was that we don't actually use green energy. What they're doing is paying a credit for green energy.
In the agreement,
So that's my question.
not all of it is green
Right.
energy, but a portion, they issue service credits.
Right, so, but ComEd doesn't do that other than the program that they
not
talked
that
to
I'm
us
aware
about.
of, right.
Okay, that was my question. So that when we have the price guarantee,
Yes.
that's not really apples,
No,
that's not really apples to
right.
apples, because the only option would be a cheaper, regular
Brown,
ComEd electricity.
Further discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton. Aye. Trustee Powell.
Aye.
Trustee Ballard.
Aye.
Trustee Connors.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Motion carries. Next up is a resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a contract with Schrader and Schrader Incorporated in the amount not to exceed of $80,937.50 for the 2014 sidewalk replacement program. Are you going to do this, or Mr. Bailey? Mr. Bailey, you want to do this?
This is in reference to the village's ongoing sidewalk repair program. During this current fiscal year, was $100,000 budgeted for sidewalk replacement. $15,000 has been used for the sidewalk inspection program. And we've also combined with LaGrange Park and Western Springs, combined our quantities to try to solicit more bidders, lower prices. I don't know that we're that successful, but we did duly advertise the project. We only received the one bid. And as far as exposed aggregate goes, for the village of Riverside, the per square foot for 5-inch exposed aggregate is $9.25. And for 7-inch exposed aggregate, the per square foot cost is $9.50. I'm planning to only authorize $70,000 in sidewalk replacement and save about $10,000 for a sidewalk saw cutting project. And we've heard, some of us have heard, at least I have heard from contractors, that exposed aggregate should be expected to be about 20 to 25% higher than regular broom finish concrete. And this is, I think, a 27% difference, so it's right in that ballpark about what contractors have suggested is the premium for exposed aggregate. I also think that this project would result in the replacement of about 300 squares. And that depends, because square is different. It's more of a square footage issue than the actual number of squares, but approximately 300 squares.
So I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve authorizing the village manager to execute this contract.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sussman.
Second.
Second by Mr. Pollack. Further comments or discussion?
You know, 300 squares, and I know, but no more concrete talk, right? And I know we promised that we'd come back and talk about the sidewalks. But I just want to know how many more squares of this 80,000 it would be if it was broom finished. Would it be nearly 600 squares?
Well, I think it'd be 25% more.
25%?
So it's 75 more.
75 more squares. Okay.
When would they start this project?
Oh, I would say early July.
And none of this will be in the CBD, right?
That hasn't been decided. I definitely plan, if you recall that the sidewalk inspection program was based on cells, the entire block.
Right.
So I'm intending to follow that format, do the entire block, not just go by streets.
It won't be in the area that the.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry. I meant in the area where the grant is, right? Yeah, okay.
I think I would like to work around downtown, the central business district. That's the highest pedestrian traffic generation area, has the highest public safety risk, liability risk, but I haven't picked out any areas yet.
Would anybody feel comfortable with, at the next meeting, when you bring back the aprons, to bring back the sidewalks and just take care of both these things at the same time?
You made a decision on whether we're going to allow. When does this contract have to?
They won't start until July 1st.
Well, if you're thinking about deciding to go with plain concrete this year, you can do that tonight. This contract allows the village, we can choose plain old concrete tonight. We don't have to go with exposed aggregate. Just like the quantity, as you know, the limit was not to exceed 80,000, but we're going to limit it to 70,000. The contract has that flexibility to allow us to choose plain old concrete, room finished concrete.
But you couldn't wait until our next meeting for us to make that decision. You need to have this contract
I think,
approved.
in the spirit of cooperation with these other communities, so your next meeting is June 19th. That would probably be okay. I haven't asked them specifically that question.
Why would we put it off? What new information do we need in this? I mean, we're asking for a specific change to the proposed ordinance for the aprons, but what are you referring to? What would be changed for this that you'd want to put it off 2 weeks?
Maybe I'm wrong, but I would think there's an ordinance that says our sidewalks have to be exposed aggregate, so we'd have to make a vote on that. If there's not an ordinance that says that our sidewalks have to be exposed aggregate, we can do that tonight. I'm prepared to get 75 more squares.
There is an ordinance that requires
so
that.
You can't do it tonight.
I mean, at our last meeting, we had this discussion, and the decision at that time was to go ahead this year with the exposed aggregate and then look at, I mean, I have to say that I tend to agree that I think we're throwing money away by waiting. I mean, if we are seriously considering allowing broom finished concrete on the sidewalks, we should go ahead and make that decision now and not spend an extra 25% at this point.
Well, and I'll say what I said last time. I'm very much opposed to, particularly in the B1 or the B2, where it is largely, if you walk down Harlem, it is largely the exposed aggregate, putting anything but that back in. I realize that in many areas of the town, there are different kinds of concrete. I just think that in the older parts of town and on Harlem and in the CBD, we should stick to the exposed aggregate. I think it's dollar-wise or penny-wise and pound-foolish otherwise.
I think we can do that and just specify only replacing sidewalks within the residential area.
Well, I'm opposed to it, as I said, in some of the older parts of town also.
That's not what you just said, though.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's B1 and B2.
No, I didn't, and I said in some of the older parts of town.
How do we carve that out?
That's the question. Do you want to have this discussion, or do you want to go ahead and approve this contract, and then we'll discuss this when we have a fuller understanding of alternatives?
I have a quick question. Ed, if the contract, the way it's drafted now, allows the village to go either way, correct?
Yes.
So it could be approved tonight, and then on the 19th, the village could make the policy decision and the ordinance change if it's needed, and then based on that, you could give the final direction, couldn't it?
That's the beauty of this contract, which was not drafted by me, but it has that flexibility. And I've been speaking to my peers, my colleagues, about your debate about the type of concrete sidewalks you want to specify. So, I mean, it's up to you ultimately, of course, on what type of sidewalks you want to have, but from administratively, I think this could wait till your next meeting for further discussion or final action, I guess.
And my point was that the contract is drafted in such a way where you wouldn't be violating your ordinance by adopting it tonight.
I would adopt the ordinance and then let's bring back a change to in the next board meeting, and we'll discuss it and see if we want to go further. And you can
What are you asking for the next board meeting? I'm sorry.
to decide whether we as a group want to change our ordinance to go to broom finish on our sidewalks. And we can make that decision.
But we can approve the contract as is
But we
tonight.
approve the contract as it is. It doesn't hold anything
that-
up. Because we're going to do something. We're going to put cement down.
Right, and then the other communities would know you're in. It's just a matter of the policy direction.
Right.
And that's not going to mess you up with the,
I think we can work with that. I'm positive. I feel comfortable.
so is that what I'm seeing we want to do, Mr. Pollard?
Do we need 2 more weeks to think? Do you need 2 more weeks to think
Well,
about it?
they have to write the ordinance. They have to-
Well, I know, but do you need 2 weeks to decide which
Are
way?
you asking the full board?
I don't need 2 weeks, but
Well,
Yeah,
I would just mention that one of the reasons at the last meeting we did it this way is because there was some concern, because this is a big change.
It is a big change.
This is a big change. And I think that one of the concerns was that we wanted to make sure that residents had full opportunity to weigh in on this.
I really don't think it's a huge change. We've become used to seeing it, but you have to understand, the sidewalk I have in front
Hold
of my
on a
home.
sec. Let's not have the discussion now. Let's decide whether we want to do this at the next meeting.
I would say let's do it.
I agree.
I agree with Joe.
Okay, so we'll have this discussion
Next
next meeting.
meeting, yeah.
But tonight, we're going to go ahead and move forward with the contract.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So are there any other questions about the contract?
Maybe put a placeholder in draft form.
Okay. And we'll bring back an ordinance that would affect that change, and then we'll have it out then.
Okay, so the ordinance will be per what Joe is requesting? And then we'll go from there?
It will provide that option, yeah, to go to.
But you could also designate out areas
Well, in the discussion,
that could be put in the ordinance.
in 2 weeks, as opposed to what you would bring to us in 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, we might need to put it on a consent agenda for final, maybe
Right.
but we'll try to set it up so the options are like there.
Okay, thanks.
B1, B2, or
Thank God.
certain areas.
Thank God we get to talk about concrete again. So just can't.
Yeah, solid discussion.
So let's, moving back to the contract, any other discussion about the contract? Okay, I'd ask you to call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollard.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins. Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries, and we will revisit this at our next meeting. Next up under consideration is a continued discussion of a potential debt issuance concerning the expiring 2004 road bonds. Ms. Francis.
Back in February of this year, we began a discussion about the expiring bonds. There were bonds that were issued back in 2004. There was a referendum that was actually approved in March of 2004, received an overwhelming support of 80% of the residents. That referendum was for streets. A little over $2 million was issued during that time, and they did a street program within the 2.5-year span in which all the bond proceeds were supposed to be spent down. During the February 6th board meeting, it was discussed as to whether or not the village board would like staff to further review and potentially entertain the process of another referendum question given the expiring debt. Staff was directed to review capital projects and provide a recommendation at this particular board meeting. Also included with your packet was actually the timeline that Attorney Mars drafted. Also was the initial reference to the capital improvement plan, which actually we'll be looking to update in subsequent months, again, as we do annually. There were some questions that actually came out of that discussion that staff was directed then to go back to bond counsel. One of them was whether or not projects could be grouped together. And in speaking with our bond counsel at Chapman and Cutler, they stated that we could group certain questions together if they made sense and if they weren't counter to one another. For example, if one was a very popular item with an unpopular item, you could not, it would basically negate the process. If you group them together, it could be basically protested. You could put streets and sewers together if the sewers were under the streets that were being resurfaced. And so that was one of the questions, because we were in the process of both having a street sufficiency study and a sewer study as well. In reviewing the various studies, capital that is needed in the current fiscal year and future years out, staff is actually bringing back a recommendation to issue or to pose the question to residents as to whether or not they would be in support of issuing debt, essentially rolling over existing debt, so it would be tax neutral to residents for, again, streets. And also illustrated within the agenda history sheet are the various revenue sources over the next 10 years. I've provided essentially projections for the non-home real sales tax, the motor fuel tax, and if a potential bond referendum was approved, what we could anticipate receiving at this point in time. And you will see that actually there will still, for streets, be a revenue shortfall of 1.3 million. So essentially, we will be able to get a number of streets completed, but we won't be able to complete everything within the street sufficiency study.
Is this only streets, or can it be sewers as well? Streets and sewers?
You can, as long as the basic premise that Chapman and Cutler told me is that you can't pick a sewer and then on one street and pick a street elsewhere. It has to be one-to-one relationship. So it has to be very specific in that regard.
Well,
But your 1.3 deficit is looking at just streets, so sewer
Correct.
would.
Sewers are covered.
Correct, and sewer already has a revenue source, which is the water and sewer fund.
$7.5 million?
We have it as an enterprise fund where money.
Correct.
The way we charge residents allows us to
I
add
just
to
want
the
to make sure,
capital fund.
because sewer comes first, and then the street.
Right, but we
Yeah,
have,
the
I think
sewer and then-
Jessica's forecasted out or projected out the way that the enterprise fund for sewers would
Okay.
work.
Well, with regard to the sewer, water and sewer, there's both work obviously that needs to be done on water main and sewers. However, there is a revenue source. Currently, the water and sewer fund is very healthy. We have actually a very aggressive water and sewer capital improvement plan over the last couple of years, actually, and we'll continue that stance. And actually, if you'll note, we haven't increased sewer rates. The actual base sewer rates, I'm not talking about the collective water and sewer rates, the increases, the incremental increases that's been passed on from City of Chicago to McCook, then to the Village of Riverside. Just our sewer rate alone, we have not increased in over 10 years.
So,
Can I just say something, Mike? One of the things that we did a couple of years ago, we happened to have shovel-ready projects for sewers when the money from the federal government came through at either a grant or at a really low interest rate. And we were really fortunate because Public Works had the shovel-ready projects there, so we were able to get that money and actually accelerate the replacement timeline. So that put us ahead of the forecasted
I guess it's just me sitting through these meetings here, and 7.5 for sewers, $1.5 million for sidewalks. Streets are one thing.
What we would do is if we do move forward with the street referendum and it is approved, any projects that we would look at our list of streets, and then we would look at the sewer projects, and Burke Engineering would create an overlay for us that we can then identify, so then we know if we're doing streets, we're also going to be doing a sewer project.
Fine. I just want both addressed.
And also, not to jump too much ahead, but because it's an enterprise fund with water and sewer, you have an opportunity as a separate item to issue debt under revenue bonds. General obligation debt is something pretty much completely separate because under revenue bonds, you're obligating that income that you're producing from individuals purchasing the water and sewer service from the village.
This is, the bond allows the village to have enough capital to basically do our streets. I mean, years ago, we used to have special service areas.
Correct.
So SSA. So when Delaplane was done, they would say Delaplane cost, $250,000. There's 87 residents on Delaplane. They divided it by the amount, took off how much is on Harrington Park, blah, 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 and they added that to your tax bill every 6 months. So the people of Delaplane paid for Delaplane, even though everyone in Riverside used Delaplane. So this is a fairer way to keep our streets on an ongoing maintenance basis, is we share together the cost to maintain our streets.
Correct. And from an efficiency standpoint, when you're looking at bidding out, because if we look at ramping up these projects within those 2 years, we include MFT and non-home rule sales tax, we're looking at closer to $3 million. So bidding out basically 1.5 or 2 million one year and 1 million the next, you are going to get a number more vendors bidding on those larger projects versus the 460,000 that we could only do annually based on our revenue stream currently. So, and your future what your present day dollars are, you're going to get a lot more done and accomplished. Actually, you could potentially get the first 5 years of the plan as outlined in the study completed within the first 2 years of the bond issuance. If you get really competitive pricing, you may even be able to go well beyond that. It just depends on what the construction market's doing at that point in time.
And just to follow up on that point, and this goes to something that you were raising, Trustee Foley, is one of the benefits of the bond route is that we would get the $2.275 million up front. So we would be able to front load the street improvements. And to Ms. Francis's point, if we were able to do the first, say, 5 years of the 10-year street improvement plan, the 3 of those years that we have accelerated, we wouldn't have the $150,000 a year of maintenance. So there's a $450,000 savings off that $1.3 million right there. The $1.3 million is predicated on doing the projects over a span of 10 years. One of the benefits of the bond is the ability to front load and do more of the projects up front. So that in itself would be a savings. It also I spoke with our engineer this morning, and the possibility of pairing these projects with sewer projects also would allow us to use some sewer money if the street is impacted by the sewer repair. So it's very likely that under the bond scenario, we could actually do everything that our engineers have recommended in the 10-year sufficiency study in its entirety. I mean, we're basically talking about if the bonds were reissued, we would basically be able to do 49% more streets than we would be able to do with our current revenue stream of non-home rule sales tax and motor fuel tax. The non-home rule sales tax, motor fuel tax generates approximately $460,000 a year. Our need for the street improvement plan is $820,000 a year. So that is what the bond referendum would allow. And I think it's also important for residents to understand that the referendum, since in essence what we're doing is reissuing bonds that have been in existence for the last 10 years, would be revenue neutral in terms of property tax bills. Property tax bills would not go up as a result of passage of this referendum.
And it would allow our public works to be more efficient with their bidding of contracts.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think one of the most important things that our engineer told us in this study is that a reactive approach is the expensive approach. What we want to do is stay ahead of the curve so that we ensure that we have top quality roads for the future. And the way to do that, and really the only way to do that, is through a bond referendum.
And since we have such a great rating in this village, thanks to the staff and Jessica, our interest rate should be very reasonable.
Very competitive.
You will, actually in comparison, you were only able to issue back in 2004 a little over $2 million. And when these sheets were initially drafted by our financial advisor, Spear, was when we were at AA+. It was showing 2.275, but obviously that's an estimate. So there is the potential that that principal dollar amount could potentially go up a little bit more because our interest obviously will shrink. So the total debt issue will remain flat, but because we're getting a better rate overall, we could potentially be getting more.
Anything to get away from a combined sewer.
So the decision we need to make tonight, because in order to, and maybe our attorneys can run through the timeline again. My understanding is that we need to have we'd have to have the question submitted to the clerk in August. Right? So what we really need to do tonight is decide whether or not we want to move forward with this, and so that we can direct our village attorney to prepare a formal question for us to review either at our next meeting or at our meeting in July.
I support moving forward with it.
I do too.
as well.
I do.
I have a question I wanted to follow up on. This idea that there's a benefit to front-loading, I think was the term, that if we had bonds, we'd get all that money up front, and we'd be able to do more up front and save money because we'd get bigger project, better prices. That's not dependent on a referendum and bonds, is it? I mean, we could borrow money.
No, if we had $3 million, then we would be able
You could borrow money and get that same benefit.
Correct, but we'd have to have it basically as one project to bid out, because the incremental is where we get the less contractors to bid on.
So there is a consensus. Okay. So we'll ask our attorneys to move forward with the drafting. Is there any new business this evening? Hearing none, we do have need for an executive session tonight at which we will discuss collective negotiating matters between public employers and their employees or representatives, and also discussion of a lease of real property owned by the village. No final action will be taken, and we shall not reconvene. So with that in mind, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Collins, second Ms. Ballerine. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Ballerine.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Floyd.
Meeting is adjourned.